Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Primetime at the BU Library. Primetime celebrates learning in and beyond the classroom of Bethel faculty, students, and staff, and is a collaborative project between the Friends of the BU Library, the Business Department, Academic Affairs, and many other offices on campus. Coming up, our little preview of coming attractions here, next Thursday, March 12th. In this place, at 11:15, Edgren Scholars, Dr. Stacy Stoffergen and Jesse Majeski, the student, will be presenting. And so Stacy is in the Department of Chemistry, and Jesse is from the class of 2020, so getting ready to graduate. They're going to share about how using computational chemistry techniques allow them to identify the likely degradation pathways of hydrofluoroolefins.
Big word.
But these are important, very important chemicals. So via the reaction with the prevalent species in the troposphere. So we're actually talking about the loss of the ionosphere, in the atmosphere. And so they're working on that problem, a very important one. And they're also studying how these fluorocarbons will accumulate in the oceans and other waters where fish and mammals are trying to survive. So today, though, we have Joyce LeMay with us, Associate Professor of Business, to discuss how organizational culture can positively or negatively influence the outcomes in seasons of change. And we know something about that too right now at Bethel, don't we? So let's welcome Joyce.
Thank you. I am excited to be here today. If there's, everybody has a couple topics that they love, and one of mine is culture. And so today what I'm going to do is share what I've learned more about culture when I was on sabbatical. So for those of you that I haven't talked to in a while, I am the associate professor and my specialty is human resource management. I've also had my own consulting business for a number of years where I go into organizations and help them to look at some different strategic outcomes. And I've worked in the field of human resources for over 30 years. So in the fall, I was on sabbatical. I don't know about any of you, but sabbatical is the greatest gift we can ever have. Oh my word, the things that I learned, the opportunities that I had. So my scholarly agenda is looking at the influence of culture in organizations and then the outcomes that we have. See, every organization has outcomes, whether you're for-profit, nonprofit, government, there's outcomes of any organization. Then I looked at changing cultures. How does it change? When does it change? How do we measure that? And then just managing culture. So as most people say, when you go on sabbatical, sometimes you make it a little bigger than it should be. And I think I did that, right? Because there was so much to learn with that. So just a quick summary of some of the things I did in the fall. I read over 50 articles, 15 books on the topic, discussed with over 20 different companies, and then did a survey with over 250 people. So a lot of exciting things were going on at that time. So to start with, what I want to talk about is the culture wheel. When we try to get a definition of culture, it's almost impossible, because if I asked each one of you, you'd come up with a different definition. Many people say, well, culture are the behaviors that take place in an organization. Now remember, I'm focusing on organizations because we have culture in the world. We have culture in the Midwest. There's culture everywhere, but I'm focusing within the organizations. So when you're looking in the organizations, look around the culture wheel and look what goes into the culture. That's a huge list. So the stories that we have, the language we use, the rituals that we have, the tools that we have, the arts, food and drink. I love they put food and drink on there. Do you think, does that influence culture? Yeah. I'll give you an example in a couple minutes. It does, I agree, it does, absolutely. And our values and the greater community. So with that, some of the other research, one was the 2017 McKinsey article on culture for the digital age. Now, the summary of that said one of the biggest problems we have with culture is how to change it. Now, many of us might go, yep, I know it's hard to change. The problem is if we don't understand how to change it, we will get stuck and we'll have bigger problems. So we have to understand that sometimes our culture can be the barrier to change if we don't discuss that. And then in 2018, a Gallup survey said, challenge is actually building and maintaining a culture. Now, I find that an interesting statement. How do you maintain a culture? Like, who's responsible for the culture? We'd all have different answers on that too. The answer is we all are. Some organizations, they say human resources, you're in charge of culture. Others say the finance department's in charge of culture. Others say the president or the C-suite or administrators are in charge of culture. The reality is we all are, which makes it complicated, right? Because we all have jobs, and our jobs, we know what we're responsible for, and a part of every job is still understanding and managing culture. So do you see where it gets confusing? Right? So you can see we're working on this in sabbatical. I'm like, okay, we've got that figured out. Now where do we go with that? Because it is confusing. So I'm going to show you a couple examples from the culture wheel, from the companies that I've talked with as well. So the first one is dealing with this book called Winning Teams, Winning Cultures by Larry Sen and Jim Hart. Fabulous book on culture. So United Health Group, which is a fabulous organization, healthcare, a large employer of so many of our alumni. My oldest son works there too, which is awesome, all right? And so what they did is they said, you know what, we have a problem. Nobody knows our values. Do we even have values? We are seen as an older company that deals with insurance. A lot of people say, boring, right? They don't want to deal with that, right? So what they did is they took the senior human resource professional and he said, talked to the C-suite and he said, you know what, that's an incredible book. Let's have that author come in and help us to redefine our values and make some changes in this company. He actually changed his title to the VP of HR to the VP of Culture. Okay, my favorite job, right? I love culture, okay? Wow, what a cool job. So he did, he changed his title.
Interesting.
So they came in, so Larry Sen came in, worked with them to rewrite their value system. The way they did that is they got everybody involved. They had the focus groups, they had training. So they came up with 6 values. So go to their website, you can see their 6 values. But what's really neat about it is how they got everybody involved in it. How they did the training is they didn't just have Larry Sen come in and do it. He trained different people in the department and they helped train everybody else. So the word was really getting around that we have these values. Then of course they printed them out on a sheet so everyone could put them on their computer. And more importantly, they put them in their performance reviews. So now everybody then was being judged based on the 6 values we have. So when we're looking to make any changes to the organization, how do they tie to our values? So they would claim that to be really successful use of values on the culture wheel. So they took where they didn't have the values, were confused, were outdated, redid them. Now they did that about 9 years ago. So you think, well, that's outdated. Why are you telling us that story? Because culture always changes. Mm-hmm. So that VP is now gone. He's retired. They have a new VP in there of HR. He's not the VP of culture. Oh, how disappointing, right? Because that person didn't want that title, and that's okay. Because the point is, culture changes. They still have those values. But recently, in November, they just had some major layoffs there. So a lot of people don't know that because we have so many alumni working there and very happy there. They had some major layoffs. So they had to deal with their culture to understand how do we deal with losing some key people, which is painful to everybody. A layoff is always painful. And those employees that are staying there, how is their work job changing? So that's part of the culture wheel as well, because now we're talking about some of the traditions when you're doing that. So I'm giving United Health Group as an example because that's an example that they said our values were outdated, let's change them. Then they've come into some of their traditions and we have to deal with making those changes as well. Okay? So my point is you're never done when you're looking at culture. So some things you think, oh, we figured out that spreadsheet, now we're done with that. Never done with culture. Okay, so let's look at another one. The cup of coffee, right? A lot of people love having a cup of coffee at work. So with this one, I'm going to use 3M as an example. So 3M has been around for years and years, obviously. They're in Maplewood. They have over 10,000 employees. And what they always did is they paid for the coffee for all their employees and guests. So over 10,000 people every day, 3M's paying for that. That's very generous of them, right? So what happened is the C-suite started looking at numbers and they said, you know what, that's costing us a lot of money. I'm not sure we can afford that. So now we're looking at our food and drink, part of culture, because everyone's used to it, right? So they handled it according to how their company operates. They're a very paternalistic company. They've changed some since then, but when they did this, very paternalistic, which meant C-suite would just say, here's what's happening, here's the change we're gonna make. So they rewrote the policy and sent it out to everybody. So the new policy said, 2 months from now, we're no longer gonna be providing coffee. All those coffee machines will go away. We have vending machines. Please tell me we're not excited about the vending machines, right? Come on, right? Okay, we have vending machines, or you can bring in your own coffee pots and do that on your own. Okay, now some of us go, well, that's really a small change. You know what? It was gigantic there because the employees fought back. They said, how dare they not care about us? They've always given us our coffee. They were mad, they were angry, they were frustrated, they were delusioned about it. Like, why are they doing this? The research shows it took 2 years for people to get over the change in coffee. 2 years. I don't know about you, but I think that's a long time. That I didn't get my free cup of coffee in the morning, right? So the challenge with them was to say, okay, if we're gonna make this change, because change happens all the time. Many of us don't like change, but it will happen. We can't stop it from happening. But could they have done that in a different way? Of course they could have, absolutely. But during those 2 years, in particular, they had very sad employees. Were their outcomes different? 100%. Because some employees just weren't as fully engaged, didn't feel as cared for, felt let down by the organization. That doesn't mean they didn't do their jobs, but they might not have done it at the level they would have done if they were fully engaged. See, that's part of what the culture wheel is about. How engaged are we? When we're looking at culture, we're looking at, does somebody really feel engaged with the organization and understand what's happening with it? And sometimes they don't. So that's just a couple examples of how the culture wheel works. And so we can see it in some different ways. Okay, so now let's look at our iceberg. All right, so this is the iceberg of culture. So up on top, up here, yep, there it works, there we go. You see, here's the water line. So what they're saying is most companies share their vision, strategy, shared values, goals. Where do we usually find those? On the website, right? So we're pretty good about sharing that. Now, when you talk to people in the organization, some people will say, it's out there, but we never follow any of it, right? I have no responsibility for it. Meaning just because it's posted there doesn't mean that's what's happening. But that's what we usually see. And then right at the line, we have some structures and some policies, some procedures that most people know about, but it's getting a little closer to the water because what we usually find with policies and procedures, not everybody fully understands them. Okay, so some people do. And then we get to underneath the water line. Number one, look how large this is. If you want to know what's running your culture, you better start concentrating down here. We have to. Too many organizations don't, and that's where we run into problems. So look what's down there. Beliefs, perceptions, values, shared assumptions, traditions, norms, unwritten rules, stories, feelings. Look where they put feelings, right? Right? And how many organizations are feelings pushing what we're doing? It's huge in many organizations. So the point with the iceberg is we can do this top part, but please don't run our organizations from the top of the iceberg. We have to have somebody understand this, and the challenge is we haven't assigned it to anybody. That's the problem. Who's responsible for all of that? And my answer is we all are. But we all don't have the authority to make the changes that we need to make. That's part of the challenge. So we have to understand the iceberg is there. So we've looked at our culture wheel, we've looked at the iceberg, and then what happens next is this. We do not want this to happen. It's the broken culture. All right, so let's see, what do we see up here? First of all, we see some people in their offices. What do you think? Do they look like they're all happy and working okay? They're not communicating with anybody, right? Say that again?
They're silent.
Yeah, they're siloed, absolutely. They're siloed, so this could be the best project ever, but nobody knows about it. That's a problem, right? And then we've got some employees just going, I have no idea what we're doing here. Right? You see, I know we're laughing, right? Yep. And over here, they're just running around. Like, I know I should be doing something, So they're lost, but they're doing something. And this has somebody just yelling to get this done. Oh my word, what a broken culture. See, the research from 2018 from Gallup said what happens is if you get to a broken culture, you're eroding your identity. When you erode your identity, the outcomes will be different. Because now we're so busy fixing the broken culture that that's taking a lot of our energy. So go back to our culture wheel. Everything doesn't have to be perfect on our culture wheel. I've actually never found an organization that has a perfect culture wheel because it's that complicated. But it doesn't have to be broken either. If it gets to the broken stage, you're going to spend a lot of time re-looking at your identity, determining who is going to be in charge of helping to fix it, and then helping people manage through whatever change we have to go through. And that does take time and energy to do that. So some people get frustrated with that because it does take some time and energy to deal with that. So with that, one of the things I did on sabbatical is worked on a survey. So I did one in 2013 and then again in 2019. So I'm thrilled I now have a trend. I love trends, right? Okay. So you've got the data. I can see what happened in the past, what's happening now. So I'm just going to share a couple of them because there's some great data with that I'm using and putting in a paper and have given it a presentation at a state SHRM conference. But I'm just going to share a couple based on our time right now. But I am surveyed over 280 people. Questions about ethics and culture, because ethics and culture are so tied together, all right? And then compared the results. So here's one question. Do you work for an ethical company? It's a pretty basic question, right? So in 2013, 89% said they did, and 11% said they didn't. In 2019, 97% said yes, I work for an ethical company, and 3% said they didn't. So whenever I see data, I say, so what? And what does that mean? What does that tell me? Does anybody have an idea what that might tell us? Anybody want to guess? I always like to get engagement, even though I'm presenting. Any ideas?
More people have moved to companies that more align to their
Values.
ethics.
Great, absolutely. If you look at 2013 to 2019, have we been talking about ethics in our culture outside of organizations? Yes, we have. Have we looked at organizations that have failed with ethics? Yes, we have. So this isn't a topic that's gone away. We've talked about it more, right? So some people would look at that and say, well, my word, we don't need to talk about ethics. Everybody's working in an ethical organization. No, I don't think we believe that though, do we? See, this is the challenge with ethics and culture. So a follow-up question, because when you do your surveys, you got to dig deeper, right? So one of the follow-ups was, my company needs to do more to create a healthy culture which encourages ethical behavior. Oh my word, this data is amazing. First of all, 13 to 15 strongly disagree or disagreed, and this was the ones that agreed, strongly agreed, or agrees. 53, 52, 46, 47. 6 years different in taking that data, and they're almost exactly the same. I say, wow, I think that's incredible. We better dig deeper to find that out. And if 97%, 89 and 97% said they work in ethical organizations, why are you having about 50 say, remember, employer, make sure you're helping to build a healthy culture for us? Doesn't that make us think a little bit more? Like, so I don't know about you, when I look at my scholarly agenda, I'm like, yay, more research I get to do, right? Because that's a huge issue. And I've talked to some employers about that. What many of them say is, we do have an ethical organization, but each individual makes decisions. And because we're all made so different, right? God made each one of us different. So that means that we're not all making the right decisions. But that's a huge number that we need to look at, which means this topic isn't going away. Okay, so let's look at a couple of pictures, because one of the top areas for culture is where we work. I'm not saying organization, I'm saying where our desk is. Okay? So, first picture. What do you see?
A hallway.
Cubes. I think they're fake green pants. I don't think they're real. Up that high, right? I love the green carpeting too. But they're tall. Can't see over the next one. Lots of people working there, right? And the green plants just try to make it a little more lively. Okay? What about this one? What do you see?
Empty. More lights.
Yes. Don't you just love the light coming in? The research has said the more natural light coming into workspace, the better outcomes we'll have. Okay? I think that's amazing. So they did that. And look at these cubes. They're much lower so everyone can see. And look, they even put glass in between, right? So one organization that did this, they were thrilled with doing this. They ran into a couple problems. One person sat on a yoga ball. You know what a great thing to do. We got to work on our core, right? Okay, so that's fine. The problem is the yoga ball person was bouncing up and down all day long. Person this side and this side was like, okay, I'm getting dizzy here, right? Okay. The other thing is they put in the desk that you can raise and lower. So since they made them so low, as soon as you raise, you're literally standing over everybody else. Okay? So, doesn't mean they can't do that, but have they prepared for that? Okay? Next one. What do we see here?
Chaos.
Yeah, chaos. Yeah, there you
Or
go.
collaboration.
Thank you. Oh, see, I love my team.
Yeah, perception. You know
Exactly.
that. Good job.
Which we get to because it
Yes.
is perception. Exactly. Like I love this part that it's, this person's moving so fast they're blurry, right? Okay. Now this is an environment where there is no desk for anybody. They come in, wherever there's a free spot, they sit down. So there's no pictures of anybody. They bring their laptop and their work and they sit down and it's a different spot any day. Okay? Many companies have moved to this. Okay? Once again, some love it and some don't. Okay? So it's engagement or it's chaos. All right? So we're going to look at that just a little bit further. But my point is to show you those is to say there isn't one perfect example, but we better understand how whatever system we have is going to impact our outcomes. So one of the questions I asked on the survey, and this was just from 2019, has the company changed the work area to have less offices and more collaborative workspaces? 51% said yes. So we're at about the 50-50 mark right now, okay? 4% were unsure. Okay, I think we should know, right? Okay, that's okay. So 51% said yes, we're getting rid of offices and having new workspaces. So follow-up question is, has the company measured the results on any workspace changes?
Right.
Right? 16% have asked that. That's really low, and I believe that's unacceptable, right? Now I love this, 53% said no, and now 31% said I have no idea. Which means we're not communicating, right? We got some issues with that one too. But the point is, if we're not following up, we don't know if it's worked or not. And what a lot of the research says is many people in the C-suite area have read, let's do this, this is engaging. And they've not fully read through to say, is it engaging for all? What about those it doesn't engage? So Susan Cain did a TED Talk on this topic. And so she had said, when we're going to these new office areas that don't have the offices, she said it's wonderful for extroverts. But what about our incredible introverts? What about jobs that work great like that and some that don't? There are some that work on so much data, they need 3 screens. 2's not even enough. Well, you can't do that in the newest way, right? So the point is we're not following through enough to make these changes, but we're spending millions and millions of dollars on this. So now more companies are starting to say, did we do the right thing? Land O'Lakes is a great example. Many students at Land O'Lakes, they're right there, our neighbors right here. Very happy employees that work there. When they built their new building, we talked with many of the alumni, and it was so interesting to hear what they had to say. Some said, I love it, I can't wait to work there. And others had said, I'm not comfortable with it, I don't even know where my desk is gonna be. And others said, we've had more people quit because we've made this new environment. Now, if you're a company that wants a lot of people to quit, I guess that's one way to do it. I don't think that's the healthiest way to do it, right? But you could do it that way. But the point was, they had turnover they didn't even want and didn't even inspect, just because they changed the office areas. Now, I'm not saying don't change. We need change. We have to manage change. So, what I'm going to talk a little bit about is how we changed in the Business and Economics Department. So, we were told we were moving to a new 7,000 square foot place. And we were excited about that. We still are excited about that, right? So when they came to us in August, they said from August until February, we'll talk about it. February we'll build and you'll move in June or July. So that's less than a year. So in higher ed, that's really fast, right? So we said, okay, we'll figure this out. So we got a team together. We had myself, we had Amanda Carter, and then we also had Jeff Jacobs. So the three of us led the team and brought it all back to the department. But we knew we had some challenges here. We already knew a lot about culture and the cultural impact of that. We said, let's do this in a way that will impact our culture. See, people make changes all the time and don't even think about it. They don't think what they want to measure. They aren't concerned about how they make changes. Some say the whole group will decide. Some say a few leaders will decide. What happens is if you don't have engagement with everybody, you will have so many complaints and so many unhappy people, you'll spend a lot of your time working on that, kind of like the coffee. Like, we don't want to spend 2 years after building this new facility saying, let's deal with complaints for 2 years. We don't want to do that, right? So one thing we did as a department is we said, let's check our vision and mission. So we did that, which is tied to Bethel's vision and mission as well. And then we said, with this move, let's look at our values. Let's take a time to rewrite our values for this new department. So that's what we did. So I'm just going to share them briefly. So we had 5 statements that we wrote as a full department. Offer greater visibility and a clear identity, expanding the reach and exposure of the department. Creating spaces to both challenge and support, aligning with the department's approach to academic excellence. Engaging or encouraging engaged collaboration, building connection between students, faculty, and partners. Promoting an environment of professional well-being and comfort and fostering respect and collegiality. Infusing vibrancy and energy while accommodating focus and purpose, enriching the culture and experience. So we wrote that as a team. One of our team remembers we did that, right? A long time ago, but we did do that as a team. We had to do it relatively quickly. We couldn't take 6 months to do that, right? Because we had 7 months before they were going to start building. So we needed to manage that, and we did. So the team helped write that. The team worked with our dean and also with work services as well, which was a fabulous team, to help make so many of the changes we needed to. So what we were moving from was 15 offices, and we had a lovely hallway. I go like this because it was L-shaped. Loved our hallway, right? Okay. But we did not have one area to greet students. We have over 460 students. Not one area to meet students. Did not have a conference room. Had no technology. So we were missing a lot of things. So with the 7,000 square feet empty, said, now you help decide what we're going to do. We had to have statements that helped us in making those changes. So what we did, you can see, you've all seen our department at some point. It's a beautiful department. I mean, we had to decide where the windows were, what lights, what words. I mean, everything was decided relatively quickly. Our offices. That's Dr. Bowen's office right there. We're moving, there you go, right? There you go, it was move-in day, that's why the boxes are there, right? So with the offices, we're allowed to have 130 square feet offices for faculty, and in doing so, we have about 30 spots for students, okay? Now remember, we have 460 plus students, all right? So we said, is 30 enough? And we said, it's not, because this is about engagement. We look back at our value statements. This is about engagement and having collegiality and working together. So we said, what if we made smaller offices? So we went to 90 square feet. Now, here's how we did that. We didn't come in and say, by the way, everybody, we're having 90 square feet, just deal with it. Because guess what, that wouldn't work, would it? No, we came in and had the full conversation. Here's our options. We can keep the 130, we'll have 30 seats for the students. If we go to 90, because our architecture looked at it, then you can have 75 seats for the students. What do we want to do? We talked, we discussed, and then we voted and had 100% agreement on going down to 90. Now, I don't know about you, but I get excited when we agree 100% on anything, right? Because in higher ed, we all have different ideas, which makes us who we are. We 100% agreed on that. There was some challenges with going smaller, but going smaller met with our value statement, okay? So that's why we did that. We built a technology room, smart board, our ticker, monitors, computers, students use, sometimes faculty are in there, and having that technology has made a huge difference. And our employers and people on our board that work for our department have been thrilled with that as well, students too. And then student area. So we have high tops, low tops, comfy chairs over here. Over on this area, there's booths. So 75 different areas. We ensured we had windows. They needed light coming in as well. So we didn't put offices there. So every little decision was made in order to have this outcome. Now one interesting thing is back on this board right here, that's a whiteboard. It's a clear whiteboard. So when we were putting this together, our team said, let's put monitors everywhere. Okay? So the students can plug in, practice their presentations. But before doing that, we talked to the students. Once again, it's easy to get information really quick. Send out a Qualtrics, you get it back within 24 hours. It doesn't take long to get information. We said, what do you want? They came back with over 85% saying, we want whiteboards, not monitors. Whoa, we would have made a huge mistake on that if we wouldn't ask the question. So the point is get feedback as you're going along. We put whiteboards in, we have movable whiteboards, and they seem very happy with that. Everybody has a computer, so they didn't need to plug it in anymore. So they were okay with that. So what did we learn about culture because of our new space? First of all, get everybody involved.
Yep.
So that meant faculty, staff, students, employers, board members, administrators, others who had moved. I met with a lot of people who had just recently done moves and learned a lot that way too. So you get everybody involved, but it doesn't have to take a long time. So you do it relatively quickly. Gather your input and measure it against your mission, vision, and values. So we continued to do that because we didn't agree on everything, which is okay, but we kept measuring against that. Don't make quick decisions. This is a huge cost to change. So if we would have decided, for instance, monitors, and then found out later to switch, that would have cost us a lot of money, and we didn't have that money to waste. So it was trying to be as open with the decisions as well, not waiting and saying, in 3 months we'll tell you what we're going to do, right? We just kind of kept that door open of what we were looking at and decisions we were making. Data matters. We had a lot of data, okay? From phone conversations, from people visiting, from Qualtrics, to continue to look at the data. Once we were done, we toured a lot. I think I gave about 75 tours the first 2 months we were open. I know how to tour that beautiful place, right? The reason that was important is that was full cycle communication. If you're asking for all this input and then you stop, the culture stream has stopped at that point. Having people come in and see what we have done and the decisions we've made kept that communication going and then opened the door for other ways which we could work together. So that was a fabulous thing to do. And then we said, of course, we had to measure the results. So we had to decide as a department, what do we want to measure? One was engagement. How often are the students there? What times are they there? So this past year and a half, we've been tracking that. What are the busy times? What are the not busy times? We've had to look at evenings and weekends. How busy are those? We had to decide how to get students in on evenings and weekends, when to have the doors locked, all of those things, and that was part of the measurement. And we also wanted to measure our student enrollment. So we said, listen, enrollment's tight, and we all know this, right? We said if we could go up 10 or 15%, we'd be thrilled. Well, after our first year, our enrollment jumped 35%. Woo! Yay, right? We get excited about that. That's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge. We're thrilled with that. Now, here's the thing. That is thrilling. One person didn't do this, okay? Our team didn't just do this. This is part of being part of an organization that really valued this change. So I use us as an example because we lived through it. We knew what we wanted to do. Here's the challenge. If we stop right now and don't continue to measure and don't continue to make decisions, it's going to get old really quick. And 5 years from now, enrollment could just go down significantly. Meaning culture, we're never done with. We're always doing something with culture. If we put it on the table, things will slow down. So we have to be careful about that as well. Okay, so next, what we look at are 5 drivers of culture changes. So if we're going to have a culture change, we have to know how to measure that change. So the first one up there is leadership and communication. So if we're going to have a culture change, we'd better understand what leaders are saying and that it matters. So let's say we had a call center. Here in our department here, we had a call center. They were talking to customers. And leadership said, what we want you to do is to talk with your customers, excuse me, and answer their questions. If it takes more time, that's okay. Great, we understand that's what we're supposed to do. If our performance review up there then measures people on the shortness of their calls and how many calls they had, that's a disconnect. So what happens is we have to have a structure put together, so structure's up here as well, that actually ties together leadership with our outcomes. Okay? Another example, a friend of mine is a VP at a company, and this just happened a few months ago. It happened in the fall. VP of a company, and they were going through some layoffs. So he was in charge of determining, oh, thank you. Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you. Do I love my department or what?
Good culture.
Great culture. Awesome culture. Love it. So this person's VP, and he's handling the layoffs for the organization. So the next day, they're going to start the layoffs. He knows who's going to get laid off. They've worked on it. He's gone through everything that they need to do with that. So the day before the layoffs, he's called in by the senior VP, and they said, I'm sorry to tell you, but you're on the layoff list as well. Okay, real company right here in the Twin Cities. What they did from their structure process and part of their values is they said, we're going to handle it like anybody else. We appreciate you. You've worked here 25 years, and we value you, but we're going to exit you like anybody else, which means you have a half hour to clean out your desk, and we'll stand there while you do that, and we will walk you out the door. Wow, don't we say wow to that? Companies do that all the time. Why would somebody do that? Because they're afraid something's going to happen to the company because they'll be so sad they got laid off, okay? But the reality is, in doing that, how did the rest of the employees feel when that happened? They were devastated because they valued this employee, right? And trusted this employee. So they felt like, wow, that could happen to me as well. So when you handle things a certain way, we have to understand the outcomes that can happen. If you're going to do that, we better be training ahead of time saying why we would do that and let people in a little bit more on some of the training. So that's where leadership and communication can really make a difference. So leaders need to understand the decisions they're making and think through the outcomes. It doesn't mean they weren't going to lay that person off. I'm not saying you have to change that decision, but the way in which we do it matters to those getting laid off and to those staying in the organization. Values and rituals. Gallup did a poll, and they said 25% of U.S. employees strongly agree that they understand the values and can implement those in the workplace. 25% understand the values and can implement that. So what's my question? What about the other 75%? That's a huge number. 75% can't do that. That says a lot about who we are. So, and that's a nationwide survey. So we need to look at our own organization. Who understands our values and our rituals? Why are we doing them? If they need to change, how do we change? We need to have more communication. Human capital. We're all human capital. God created all of us. And we're all different, which is so awesome, right? We're all unique. So what that means with human capital is how are we going to select people? How are we going to retain people? How are we going to develop people? And how are we going to help people going through change? So often, we understand how to select. We all know an interviewing process. Some understand development, some don't. But many do not understand how to help people with the change. Change is part of who we are. It's part of culture. So we need to get the right people involved in helping to manage change, or we're going to have some issues with that. Work teams and cultures, huge issue as well. So I already kind of mentioned that one, but the teams we put together and the structures matter. So make sure with everything else we understand that, and if we have to change that, we have to explain those changes. Remember, those are right kind of on the surface of our iceberg, so we have to make sure we explain it. And then performance matters. How do we perform people? That doesn't mean an annual performance review. It means on an ongoing basis, helping people to understand who they are and what they've done. So with that, I have 2 tools to help us in order to do this better, okay? So the first tool is ask why 5 times. How many of you have done that before? Many times we have, right? So let me give you an example. Customers won't pay for the brochure that we're printed. Well, that's not good. Say we're a printing company, we made brochures, we don't have to pay for it. So you're the manager, you say why? Well, delivery was late, so the brochures couldn't be used. Now as a manager, you might say, well, whoever's in charge of that, let's write them up. Or if you're really mad, let's fire them, right? Okay, hopefully we're not doing that, right? But you see how you can just respond to that and make a decision? But then you say, why? The job took longer than expected. Okay, who estimated that job? Who said it was going to take that long? Because that means more training and development. Next you say why, and they say we ran out of printer ink. Aha, we're getting somewhere. Who ordered the printer ink, right? Well, let's figure out why that is. So we're not done with our why. The ink was used on a larger last minute order. Somebody approved a last minute order, all right? Now as an organization, you should say, that's great, we have more revenue, or because of that, we didn't have enough ink, so now we've lost another order. So we go to our why. We didn't have enough ink in stock and couldn't get new ink in time for the brochures. Now you look at the first why and look at the last why. Is the way you're going to handle that different? Absolutely, because we have different information. So as long as people understand why we're asking why. See, if you don't say, I'm going to ask why 5 times, you can really irritate people, right? Because they're like, quit asking me why, I already explained it. Sometimes it means talking to different people as you're learning more, then you can make a better decision. So in this instance, we want to find somebody who can deliver on a short notice so we can still do last minute orders, also deliver projects on time. So it might mean we just have to find a new person to deliver our ink. All right, we can do that then. Okay? So the point is that's a tool we can use, because a lot of people say, you talk about the culture wheel, you talk about making change. We have to have tools that will help us then to make the change. Okay, so one other tool is 6 thinking hats. Has anybody ever used this tool before? A few people have, a few people haven't. It's awesome. It's by Edward DeBono, 1985. He and a team came up with this. And what they said is each hat thinks a different way.
Yeah.
So you assign people that, talk about a great discussion. It's incredible. So let's look at a quick example. Let's say the organization says, determine if your company should give raises this year or have a second year of no increases. Profits are flat, economy's uncertain, expenses are rising. So if you're working in that environment, what do you think normally is the answer? No raises, right? I mean, that's pretty exact. We don't have money for raises. Look at the seriousness of what's going on. So what we say is, let's assign everybody a colored hat. So if you're the white hat, you're thinking data information. So the white hat means, let's talk about the flat economy, the expenses rising, because we need that data. So that's our data person. The black hat's really cautious, a little defensive, little unsure about things. We need a pessimist. That's okay. That can bring a whole different view of things. Yellow hat is optimistic. Here's why we should do it. Here's the benefits of doing it. And then the blue hat is our logical, sequential person. If we do this, here's the date we have to have this done, and then this done, and here's the process and procedure. The red person deals with the emotions, and this they could deal with the emotions of the employees. If we give the raise, this is how they'll feel. If we don't give a raise, this is how they'll feel. And the green colored is my favorite, because that's the person thinking outside the box. They come in with new, different ideas that we wouldn't even gotten to if we were just having the initial discussion. This person might say, we can't really afford the raises, but we could give bonuses based on, and fill in what the bonuses could be. That would increase our revenue so we could still afford to give bonuses. That might be what they come up with. They might give some kind of piecemeal based on if we're doing some kind of product, okay, instead of a service. They might say, well, we normally give 5%. Let's give 1.5%, so we're giving something and see how we could afford that instead of the regular. The point is they think different, which is great. So one way you can do this with your focus group is if you know people have a certain strength, assign it to them. If you have an optimistic person, let them be the yellow person. Or do the opposite. Have the person who's usually the pessimist say, you're the optimist this time. Okay? Have the person that's usually a green person say, you're the white person, just bring the facts. Do you see how that's going to change if you assign people in different ways? It's incredible what we can do with that. So it's a really great tool to have other conversations. Then you can make decisions based on some of these outcomes. So what we've looked at today then has been the culture wheel, the iceberg, the broken culture. We looked at some questions that have impacted culture. We looked specifically about how we made the changes in our department, and we're not done. That was our initial work that we did. And then just giving you a couple tools on how to deal with culture change as well. So there's a lot more we could talk about, but wanted to keep it to our time constraint as well. But you can see why I'm excited about this topic. And I've got a lot more fun research to work on in dealing with culture. So I'm happy to open it up for any questions or comments.
Good.
Joyce, so you seem to imply that a goal of changing culture is to increase engagement. How's that different than employee satisfaction?
Great question. Employee satisfaction can really be dealt with in a different way than engagement. Engagement is how we are talking and relating to each other. Employee satisfaction, they might be working in a job that has less time always engaging specifically, but they really just love their job and they're satisfied that way. So when you look at the surveys that are out there for engagement and for satisfaction, there's some different types of questions. They do overlap, they absolutely overlap. And so engagement seems to be the term that we're using right now, a little bit different than satisfaction. It's kind of the hottest term right now, so there is crossover with that, but the questions are just a little bit different. Yeah.
We saw a nice enrollment bump after our space improved, and did we see that in other departments over the last 10 years at Bethel that have had like the nursing or the biokinetic space? Did they also see similar shifts in culture and enrollment from those changes?
You know, I did not specifically look at all of that. I know nursing's a little different because they've always been limited on how much because they'd always have more if they could. And so I didn't look specifically at all the other programs. A couple I asked said they weren't measuring that specifically, but we have the data, we could go look at it. Yep. Yes.
I'm curious, what did you notice about organizational units? Because like different units have different perspectives and processes and ways of reacting to and managing change. So, I mean, when you think about organizations of higher education, you have managers, you have faculty, you have staff, you have what did you notice about sort of those, I mean, maybe the layers of onions of the culture wheel, like each layer probably responds differently. What did you notice about that?
I noticed exactly what you just said. They all respond differently. And so that's why it's hard to say who's in charge of it. You can have a couple departments that totally understand change, they get that, and their culture wheel is working pretty well. Other times I've seen the whole organization is so out of whack that none of them are working too well. And other times the challenge has been no one knows who's in charge. That seems to be the biggest problem. So what happens is we get these silos of unhappy people, happy people. Everyone's kind of not working in silos with their job, but working in silos of their attitudes. And that's what's harder to make the changes with. So that seems to be a thing that a lot of companies are working on right now.
Very interesting. Could perhaps in future, maybe, you could look at, and would it be different? Organizations, culture in different organizations. So culture in business
Yes.
vis-a-vis culture in higher education institutions.
Yes, right.
Perhaps vis-a-vis culture in faith-based institutions.
Yes, right.
Might there be a difference?
Absolutely.
And I
Good
appreciate
point.
the fact that you did kind of a longitudinal study.
Yes.
With looking 5 years then and
Right.
5 years and then
Right.
not 2019, 20, and then you see what changes.
Exactly.
And then perhaps you could see what factors, what trends, what, you know,
Yes.
as it relates to these different organizations or institutions per se.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. And a lot of the companies I went out to were just people that I had different connections with just from working in the Twin Cities for so many years. So it didn't go to one particular type of company. But what I found unique was they're all challenged by it. I didn't find anybody saying, our culture is perfect, everyone be like us. I didn't find one like that, okay? So when we talk about culture, it's real and it's there, but it would be great to dig deeper based on some specifics, and then we'd get a different level of comparison, which would be great. Yeah. Good. Anything else? Yep. Thanks for being here today. I appreciate it.